The 10th of May 2020, quite the reverse. I understand Romanticism quite well. You might have some problems with it. To start with, there were the noble among the elites, and this is the only reason why you have had whatsoever chance to move forward, to acquire education, knowledge, and the superiority of mind, which you have used against those who have given you the privilege and made it sweeping. So I guess there was the problem of the abusive monarchy and the abusive church. And these are the people within the top elite ranks that decided it was wrong. And then there are the abused. Most probably there were some elite fights which resulted in the evil winning the battle after battle after battle after battle. Obviously, there is no equality on the battlefield if it is not a battlefield, but a different battlefield. So it is not about the skill you actually have for what we call fair play, but the craftiness and all the perversion of your nature that makes the evil win over the noble. But this is only the first stage. So probably some from the elite, the top elite, were degraded to the level of the lowest. And they might have been lucky to live among good people, and that started appreciating them. So they saw a totally different world down there, and they saw the abuse. They saw the abuse even better. And this is what raised the lowman to higher perspectives. Sadly, they did not recognize what should be obvious by the Hindu standards of perceiving life, that the law are law. So I always say, among Nazis, they were loving families. Probably they invested quite a lot in charity, and so on and so forth. But then there's the real nature, and it always shows through finally, eventually, in the end. And it has shown through explicitly. You are lower than me. I believe it can also be connected with the rise of the Rothschild family, where someone started becoming rich, but he did not have the nobility, the highest title. whatever the infernal scheme behind, I do not know, because I do not belong to the tribe. I belong to God, to the order of God. Not the perverted idea of it, but the one that really rules and gives life. And this is probably why the real elites were to be leveled with the people from lower ranks. Probably some kind of infernal powers, whatever it is responsible for the intelligence. Because it takes enormous intelligence to rule the world. I mean, whether you are evil or whether you are good, it always takes unbelievable intelligence. I vested in God. That was the decision I made after coming back from St. Hill. I decided my wisdom was not adequate to the task. Not that I wanted to rule the world, I wanted to save the world. But that is the decision I made in 2003, when I decided how powerful my life had become. And it was specifically on the day when there was an accident in front of my block of flats. There was a dog and it went under the car. And I knew that it was a part of my mind. So then, this is exactly when I made this decision, and when I put on my medal from Vatican on again. For the connection with God. I don't think you realize what you have become, even you Christians. It is just unthinkable, but you are totally incapable of looking at yourself and seeing what you really are. So basically, in that overall context, what we have in Romanticism as the general spirit is indeed the call for freedom, the call for rights that are natural. So there's no question about the atrocity of people being abused. And I don't think anyone of a sound mind would question that in general terms, because we are talking about life in general. So people are not to abuse one another. But then these natural rights of men came from God, obviously. And this is how the Romantics viewed it. And then we have the first misconception. There is the church and there is God. So it takes a look at the history of the Roman Catholic Church to see where the church started going one way and got another. And there's also this question that I actually posed of the origin of the church as an organization. Whether these were first Christians organizing to have some stability, to be strong, to survive as Christians, or whether it was a decision by Rome so that they would be kept under control and obviously demoralized, degraded, debased. And then there's the question, the ontological question of God, so atheism. if we view it as something different from the current mechanistic idea of the world, because you can believe you are a spirit and still not believe in God, and this is what basically the term comes from. It has probably undergone changes of meaning throughout ages and the development of different philosophies, which I do not know, but generally for the purity of the concept. No one doubts that Coleridge was a very spiritual person, and apparently I have had signals that his atheism is one of the possible resources for the modern mind. So we start with the freedom and the natural, God-given right of man. And obviously this is meant to be the fight for. Now the fight against is the fight against the tyranny. So who was the tyranny then? So we know that the objects, that the well, groups, let's say groups, it's not the right word, but I cannot think of a better one right now. The groups considered tyrannies then were the powers ruling, that is the monarchy and the church. So it is simple. The God-given rights are spiritual by nature, but they were called human rights. Freedom is the dream. There's the question of justice. So what is basically meant by injustice? Well, for instance, you work and your work is taken as belonging to someone else. This is injustice. Your work, all you have achieved in your life, is yours. So there was the injustice. What you have earned is what you have earned. And it belongs to you, not to anyone else. And then, of course, there's the question of the organization of life, like we can help each other. There are other values. Well, some people can do certain things, some people cannot do certain things. So basically we arrange it in a society so that we would live happily. But the basic injustice is that someone takes from someone what does not belong to him or her. And then there's also the injustice of all sorts of abuse, whatever abuse it is. So I know, there comes the king and he likes this girl, so he takes her. Well, it does not change when the guy from the next hut does the same. He has as much right, that is, he does not have the right, just like the king does not have the right, actually. But then obviously it was looked differently. So the monarchy was considered a tyranny. And as we move into our current times, we need to see who does the things that the Romantics were fighting against. And I'm sorry, but it is you who does not understand Romanticism at all. And it might happen that among the Romantics were, well, the question of Byron. Is he worth anything at all, or is it just promiscuity and eloquence? Well, it's certainly worth checking. So, what would Byron represent these days? Would he be like all these men? Only perhaps more skilled in language? Or would he have some actual value? Because you know, today, what you call the sexual freedom is actually a tyranny. The lower classes are the tyranny. The mob is the tyranny. And the most important thing that Romantics missed is the inadequacy of the people to rule the world. And this is why there are lower classes. And morality is a key factor. But then there's another idea I wanted to add to it, but it has just skipped my mind. Also, when thinking of India, well, perhaps I will remember it in a second, or if not, then not. Then perhaps some other time. Sadly, the idea has not returned, but I will elaborate a bit more. So basically, already then, as the Romantics saw the French Revolution and all that followed, they already knew that there was something essentially wrong with that. And they were terrified by the atrocities, because it was the real human face, the real human nature. And, you know, who is the tyranny now? I believe that we should bear in mind that if someone was the king or queen of a country, not to mention an empire, it is not a weak spirit. You try to create the impression that, you know, all that power, as exemplified by celebrities, comes from all sorts of structures, constructions, connections, etc. But it's not true. And whatever you might have done to those people enraged, they will come back to take what is theirs. There is a question of libertinism. In our current world, with the celebrities and models, we can see the, as I called it, the living cartoon of man or woman, the caricature. And, you know, these are the lower classes that are sexual. Sex is low. And if you try to take it higher, you degrade the whole society and humankind. The base, it, and there's no question about it. So you can see these newcomers into power, like Ricky Martin, he has enormous power. I must say that this is truly impressive. I don't know how intelligent he is in other terms, because obviously the creation of a video clip takes more than Ricky Martin on the scene, on the stage. But on the stage he does quite a lot. And there's a lot actually. So perhaps, he's the aspiring power, the leader. Or perhaps he just does what he can to give the power to someone else. But this is the Latin America against the white man, and the white man repeating, following the leader, and getting the bodies and become the dream to become a celebrity, and it is not complete idiots only. I mean, we have a great example in Poland, Małgorzata Bela. This is the model, the top model, the supermodel of the international renown. And look at her story in spiritual terms. To start with, she is a daughter of a professor teaching English literature at the Jagiellonian University. This is a very high prestige. This is unthinkable prestige. Well, perhaps the professor is not, the star of the university, but still, to be the professor is quite a prestigious, especially of that university. And then, the first thing she does, she resigns from studying English philology to become a model. So what does it do to the values? And that is, of course, self-degradation, because she puts the sexual, the financial, the fame, and whatever were her other motivations, but these are obvious. She must have accepted that, and she must have wanted that. Before her intellectual progress, her spiritual progress, that can be understood as a spirit realizing the talents given by God, whether she believes in God or not. Her mom did. I'm not sure if she still does, but she certainly did when she was a student. And she chooses to be a model. So, she does not realize all her talents she has to become a highly qualified, or perhaps not qualified, because this is talking in business terms again, about the things that are actually the aspiration of a human being, education, especially literature, the humanities. This is so great for the spirit. And she rejects it, or she replaces it with becoming a model. But that is the first thing she does. What she does next? Well, next, as a model, she promotes of the Satanism. She was in heavy Satanism. What happens next? Well, at one point she leaves it, whether she left it or not, and gives it to someone else. And for some reason it touches me, probably because I was a virgin, and she knew of my existence. So she destroys a life far nobler than hers, in full awareness of what she was doing. How much more she degrades herself by that, in spiritual terms. But that is not all. She involves her mother in it. So her mother turns against this trusting soul who meets her in total honesty in total trust, in total happiness of the meeting. Actually in love, not to confuse with some lesbian ideas of what a meeting between a woman and a woman, between two women is. And the professor betrays her former student, the student with whom she had a slightly different relation, because I was the student's representative and she was the student's representative. I represented the student and she represented the staff, the professors. And she participates in pushing this perverted, satanistic sexual life of her daughter onto me, the virgin, the innocent, believing in God, already in trouble, trusting her. And this is Małgorzata Bela. So you can see how debased, how degraded the people who had the potential to actually be the creators of the new world, to rule the world, are nowadays. And this is, of course, the debasement of both her, through her moral, through her fall, after fall, after fall, after fall, and me, due to the body I have. What happens next? Well, of course, the world created once has a continuation. My mom. And finally, we have arrived at my decision yesterday. Well, now we are at the extermination of Poles, Polish people. Poles are Polish people. Because such people have no right to, not only to live, to exist at all. And of course, there are huge powers behind it. Now, who is the power? That is a great question. So we can think of the monarchies fighting against monarchism. We can imagine that the British monarchy at one point decided that they would treat France with libertines. And you know, what a laugh it was to look at those people claiming they are free, you know. Imagine those obese people sitting there with Marquis de Sade and saying this is their freedom to eat more and more and more and more. And obviously that the moral degradation of committing murders, the whole philosophy of de Sade, what is it? Any value in it? They say that people get power through all those, through evil. Well, they used to get power through God. And it's quite questionable that the evil will not reach back for them. At least Shakespeare maintained it would. Perhaps that is why, from what I see, Shakespeare is supposed to go into the past and stay there, or even not, perhaps. Perhaps it is not Mao Zedong only that the New World Order inspires, plans to wipe out of history. Mao Zedong, for the obvious reason of his life being the Chinese debt to Russia. So, as long as China is defined as the creation of Russia, there is a problem. I don't have answers. I'm not claiming I have them. I'm talking about the phenomena and discoveries I have made. For instance, as far as the Roman Catholic Church is concerned, we can recall the commandments and the commandment of creating an image or whatever, not only of people, and worshipping it instead of the spirit. And perhaps that was the important point Islam made. But then, if you think of it, if you think of the Vatican, I was so shocked. I bought the first book of the Bible for the millennium. And I opened it and I saw the pictures, the paintings, and they are profane. So, what are they doing in the Vatican? And then you can also think of the role of the artists, so many of them coming from the lower classes. And now that's what we have about celebrities. So, on the one point you can have this attitude of superiority that I assume due to the war. And say that, well, they come from the lower classes, so they will do whatever you want. But then they have their game, so to say, as Scientologists put it, and not only Scientologists, because there are two metaphors of game, I believe, currently. One is the Scientology one, and another is the theory of the game. They take in the people from the elites, from the real elites, through sex, seduction, through vanity. Obviously, the whole fashion world works on vanity. And look at our bodies. I don't know, do you really believe that the child you will give birth to will come from the genes of your ancestors? Because I do not. And then, do you believe William Wordsworth would support such a project? How natural is that? Last but not least, perhaps earlier, the question of equality. No, we are not equal, that's all. We are supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law. So, if I commit a crime and you commit a crime and the crimes are the same, then you and me receive the same punishment. And that is the equality that was meant. No other equality. I mean, also the equality, of course, of race and so on, but that somehow comes together. So if I have the right to receive education, you have the right to receive education, and so on and so forth. But then, if you do not want the education, and if you take the time by disruptive behavior and deprive others of the possibility to learn, you have no right to be there at all. A few words on my family, because you are trying to use that. The recent hit was my father shouldn't have gone down to the level of my mother. I would like to say to my father's family only that if I were you, I would not risk viewing it in those terms. Apart from me as the miracle in the lives of both, I believe that my grandma's ancestors must be far higher than my dad's. And let me remind you, my grandma has the spiritual, I don't know if she has the spiritual too, but certainly the genetic connection to Austria. Miraculously, the idea has returned. It's of course about the mechanistic one. So I'm just copying the essay by Julius Kleiner, and I have just I was writing about that exactly before I decided to make this recording. So that starts in the 19th century. This is the Romanticism. So the introduction of, perhaps earlier, the introduction of the machine. And I believe that this is if we think of it, what it really means, we should separate those two origins, I would say, because I believe that the origin of the fight for freedom and the claim for the natural God-given rights is different from that which puts in the machine. And there's the social aspect of change to work conditions, etc. But what's more important is the introduction of the machine. As someone put it, this is not my idea. The very introduction of the plane, I don't remember, I heard it about the conference, the conference on transhumanism. The very introduction of the plane destroys the natural as you travel from time zone to time zone. And there's this disarrangement of time. But I think there is more to that. There's more to the introduction of the machine. And it was spotted by Russians already at the beginning of the 20th century. Perhaps these ideas have been suppressed. We also need to be aware of another, of course, now we need to view that way at the digitalization. Perhaps one more thing, and again the idea has left me. They go through my mind. Some of them are mine. Some of them must have been thought of by other people, and suddenly I receive them and filter them through my order of all sorts of mind processes and spiritual abilities in viewing the world. What was it that I wanted to add? There was one more idea. Oh yeah, COVID. So this is the newest idea, the idea I had yesterday, that it might be that the overall virus is a development from some tissue that left the laboratory and comes from an extraterrestrial being in the first place. The Hollywood, the American. Agnieszka Justitia, the first of honest, yeah.